Today on Conversation Aloud, we're discussing what does culture mean in a multicultural world, and how has the social fabric of the US been shaped or shaken by policies like Trump's stance on immigration. We're joined by Natalie Huber Rodriguez, who is a student of anthropology and has a focus on Native American and Latin cultures, and who herself has Cuban roots. She has a number of publications relating to Native American history and social issues. Welcome to the show, Natalie.
Thank you so much for having me. Very happy to be here.
Great to have you. So let's start with some basics. What is culture? Is it simply a set of traditions, and how is it different to maybe, let's say, values?
Right. So, the anthropological definition of culture, if you want to keep it purely academic, is any set or series of ideas, customs, and social behavior that is learned by one particular group of people or society and that is passed down through the generations within that group. That is the very um, most academic, most basic definition I can give you. Now, that of course I think is very simplistic, and it's very and it leaves a lot of questions unanswered, right? Um, but culture, again, I would say to generalize it, it really is kind of any series of learned behaviors, and it certainly, I would say, is tied to values, because you are going to teach and pass on these learned behaviors based on values, right? And the thing about culture that makes it even harder to define is that it's not static. It changes all the
Mm.
time. So when people try to define it and say, well, in this, traditionally in this culture, this is this way, um, that's, it's only true to some degree, right? Because that may have been true at one point, but culture is constantly shifting and changing because we as human beings are constantly changing. Our world is growing and developing. We are encountering new ideas, new people, new thoughts, new values that we may not have been aware of previously. And just with that alone, and even just compared to 100 years ago, 50 years ago, even 10 years ago, culture or what you could define as the culture of a particular people will not be the same as it was. And when people talk about traditional culture, they are usually looking at a specific time period. They kind of mean in a historic context. They're looking back, like, say, if they're looking at, particularly when it comes to an indigenous culture, pre-colonization or pre-contact with outsiders, with Europeans, before the culture, as people believe from an academic point of view anyway, was changed or painted to some degree, back when it was, in its original pure form, as some people like to believe. But I find that a very sort of simplistic and almost sort of kind of romantic point of view to look at things that way, because even pre-European contact among the indigenous Americas, indigenous people had contact with each other, with various groups and tribes and cultures that were extremely diverse and as different from one another as the countries of Europe and Africa and Asia would be from one another. Completely different languages, different sets of beliefs, different values. So the idea that there was always like, oh, one traditional culture for any particular group of people, and it was only after we started becoming a more, I guess, globalized world, and ideas and culture started mixing, I think is inaccurate, at least from an anthropological point of view. And when it comes to values, especially, that I find that particularly true because, like I said, values I find are always changing. What we valued or what people valued in our parents' time is not the same things as we value today. What was acceptable back then is not necessarily acceptable anymore. I think that's particularly true in terms of what we see, especially when it comes to older generations and older people who think one set of behavior is still okay, and we know it's not anymore, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true, and I think people do forget that that point you made, which is culture changes
Hmm.
with time, values change with time, and so a lot of times people are set on that particular culture that they don't want to change, but it has always changed with
Yes.
time. As everything changes around us, we also change to it. Um, I think that the main issue, I feel like there's two types of countries. There are the countries where there isn't that much immigration or different cultures. It's not a culture pot, let's say, of
Hmm.
different cultures in one area. They haven't maybe mixed that much.
Right.
But then there are other countries like the U.S., now the UK, where it's
Hmm.
a lot of different cultures.
Yes.
And so there's kind of this tug, this kind of rope where one side is kind of saying we need to kind of define a particular culture
Hmm.
that brings us together, and then there's this other side that says, let's celebrate the different cultures. In multiculturalism, it is great that we can understand each other better and share things together. Do you see the issue with the multicultural area? Because we're having this debate now in the UK. It's a big
Hmm.
debate we're
Of
having
course.
because of the quick change in demographic in the UK because of the high immigration
Hmm.
that we're having. Um, it's impacting people's idea of what it means to be British.
Right.
Um,
Hmm.
and so, do you feel like there is a basis for that? That there is kind of a foundation for people to be worried about this.
I don't for the UK, and here's why. I like to give this example. My sister-in-law is from Japan, and Japan for a very long time is the word you were looking for was for countries that say don't have as much immigration, don't have as much cultural and ethnic diversity, is what we call a more homogeneous
Mm.
nation.
Yeah.
The people more or less are of the same ethnic background, of the same religious background, of the same set of beliefs that have been held for a while. And the reason Japan has maintained that for a while was they were what's called a closed country for a very, very long time, up until only within, I believe it was the 18th or 19th centuries, to the point where they literally closed their borders. They would not allow any Westerners into their nation. And that was partially for protection, for reasons of that they were worried about conquest and colonization, which is legitimate, but also because they sort of wanted to preserve everything that they were as well, in terms of traditional Japanese culture. And because they were sort of closed off to the world and isolated from foreigners and everything for so long, they sort of have maintained that homogeneity that they still have today. Like, obviously, of course, there are foreigners in Japan now, and they have been vastly influenced by Western culture. But in terms of the people that you see there, and I know having been there before, and the population in general, they that idea of like ethnic diversity and multiculturalism and an immigration problem just does not exist. Um, but the difference between them in the UK is that if you look at the history of the country, so I just gave the history of Japan and how Japan, unlike the UK, was trying to really keep to itself, and sort of hide from the rest of the world. Britain has never, ever done that. And I think nobody can disagree with that. Britain, as a nation, state, has colonized and conquered more parts of the globe than really any other empire or nation state has, if you count the total history. More than the Mongolian, more than the Roman, more than the Nordic and Viking. If you go all the way back to the very first kind of time, or the earliest times when the British were, because they were a seafaring people, sailing away from Britain and into other worlds, and not only just going to these worlds to visit, but actually to conquest and colonize these worlds, and on top of that, bring people back from those other places that they were going to their own country, usually as slave servant, not under any good circumstances.
Mm.
So I think for that reason, it's really a kind of it makes no sense to suddenly then say, when you were purposely going out and looking for other cultures to explore, for other places and people to see and things to learn and bring back to your own nation, particularly with things like the spice trade, with so many goods and products that were just not available in Britain. So they really started the process by being the ones to go out and start and essentially kick off colonization for the British Empire. I mean, and that is an argument you hear among a lot of the immigrants in Britain, is that we didn't come to you, you came to us first. I mean, so to really, you started that in a very violent way, no less. And then to then suddenly backtrack after having conquered and colonized our homes and left them in oftentimes a lesser state than they were before, left us with less independence, left us with less freedoms, really, and then to suddenly say, well, now, okay, we've gotten what we want, we don't want you anymore. In my opinion, is, you know, it makes no sense, and it is an unfair position. Not only that, but to be British in of itself is an odd thing too. I mean, what is Britain even? Britain is made up, if you look at it technically, of what? Scotland, England, Northern Ireland, Wales, and at one point Ireland too, right? So even if you look at it from an ethnic point of view, I would say there is no one British or ethnic identity that you can say encompasses all of the people of the United Kingdom. For example, my husband here in Scotland, if you were to ask somebody what do they identify as, most of them will say Scottish over British. So are they still British or are they not? And even if you go even further back into history with that, there was always a great divide within what is known today as Britain, and the different cultures that existed in what is now Great Britain at that time, between the Highland Scots, the Welsh, the English, and even before then, the ancient Celts, the Romans. I mean, there was never kind of a singular culture here, I would say, at least, or if there was, it was prior to Saxon invasion and Roman invasion. And it would have, again, it would have been those very, very ancient old Celtic tribes that inhabited these islands. So to say, you know, when you say like, oh, it's threatening what it means to me as a British person, you're kind of really putting yourself into this pit of, well, what is a British person even? What identify, what is the definition of being British, with all of the different cultures, all of the different systems that have, and systems of government, and systems of values, and systems of ruling, and ideas, and everything that has gone through Britain in its history, at least in its recorded history. So that's my opinion. But I do also, from the other side, see, and I see it as more, again, a sense of, you see it in America too. People want to belong to something, right? And want something that unites us all. And I feel like it's more this sense of kind of this sort of romantic nationalism that people get attached to with that, even though they don't really know what it means necessarily to be British when they use that word. They just know they want to be a part of something bigger than themselves, where there's a large population of other people within that collective, right? We are social group creatures by nature. We like to put ourselves into categories of us and them, and we want to be able to identify and have a tribe, as we will, or have a group, have a clan, have something that we can attach ourselves to that is greater than us and the individual, as the individual. So I do see that, and I see Americans definitely share that as well, because we have always been a nation of people from all different places, not quite in the same way that the UK has, but to a degree. And so we really want something that sort of we can stand behind and say, okay, this is us, this is who we are, and in that population, or the large numbers of us all together under that identifier, that makes us stronger, or that gives us something that the others don't have.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, it's interesting you brought the US. Do you feel that the US does a better job at kind of defining this, let's say, core culture that, because we in England, in the UK, we always look at the US and say, wow, they love their flag. They always, they're very, very American, and they make it. They make everyone around them know that they are American. It's very opposite of British, So do you think that Americans, is it a good thing that they kind of have this culture of proud of to be American, because it helps other cultures assimilate into this kind of unity?
Well, when you say that idea of being American and being a proud American. What I find is it usually comes down to one particular demographic of Americans, and those are white Americans, mainly. White Americans who are non-immigrants, may have immigrants in their family, but usually back at least a generation or two, like probably not their parents, maybe their grandparents, but probably not either. So again, it's those Americans who say like, oh, again, they take pride in having been here for a very long time. So the further back you can sort of say, oh, my great 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 grandmother had came to America, which they all did, of course. And when we're talking about white Americans anyway, unless they're indigenous, somebody came at some point. But the further back you can say someone came back, then you can call yourself a true American, as it were. And that makes you sort of more American than, say, someone else who is obviously, first and foremost, an immigrant, or whose parents were immigrants, or whose grandparents were immigrants. And somehow, to me, I find that that's very that exclusive of a lot of other people who could be just as proud to be American, but in different ways, right? Running around saying, "Oh, I love the flag, I love my country," and my great great grandfather fought or grandparents fought in every world war, going all the way back to the Revolutionary War, is one thing, and that is, a certain sense of patriotism and pride that I think often gets associated with America. But I think it is very exclusionary of a lot of other people, particularly, like I said, people of non-white communities, who maybe are still proud to be American, but also at the same time have suffered a lot at the hands of the American government throughout history. African Americans, in particular, Indigenous Americans, a lot of Latino Americans nowadays, and people who just, while they are glad to be in the country and be a part of it, they still recognize that the country isn't perfect, and it isn't, and they, unlike a lot of the white Americans, have seen firsthand just how imperfect the country can be, and have endured a lot of some of the country's darkest and most shameful moments, right? When it comes to slavery, when it comes to Native American genocide. So to, I guess, like, break it down and say, oh, the Americans, they know who they are and they're so proud. I think that people, at least stereotypically, are thinking of those, that one particular group of Americans. And the reason they are so proud and think, oh yeah, this is the greatest country in the world. We're powerful, we're proud, we're strong, is because they, because of their background, have never experienced what it's like to be on the other end, when you are not considered what the ideal American was or would have been back in back, at least in historical times. Correct? I mean,
Yeah.
up until relatively recent history, anyway. If you're looking at America as a whole and the whole of its history, which is quite brief too, when you think about it, and compared to other countries. But really, a lot of the segregation and of separation of and sort of division within America, of who are the real Americans and who are not, has gone on up until quite recently, and is still even going on today to some degree, right?
Yeah, yeah, and it's the point of America is different to different people, and what it means to be
Exactly.
American is different to different people, based on that. What it means to be American is different to different people. On multicultural a nation can be before it loses like cohesion. Because the critics of multiculturalism say it creates like these kind of parallel societies, and the
Mhm.
issue that is kind of gluing us all together is trust, right? You trust that when you're driving, that the person that's driving opposite you is not going to turn into you, and
Mhm.
that's how the system works. That's how we function as a society. And as soon as trust is eroded, that's where we're in big trouble, right? And the more parallel societies we have, the more we distrust each other because we don't know each other. We don't have the thing that kind of brings us together. So do you think that we need to limit how multicultural we can be, or at least kind of create this kind of core culture for us to function properly as a society?
I don't think it's so much a problem of the cultures of themselves, as long as you adhere to, I would say, the central value, going back to now culture and values of the nation that you have either chosen to come from or have had to come to or chosen to come to, be it the UK, the US, or uh, or have to come to by necessity. I think that when obviously when you immigrate or go to a new place that is not your homeland, there is an expectation, right, that you are meant to follow the laws and the rules and the overall general values of that place that you are going to, even if some of them may contradict with your own. Um, and that I think is what maybe people are most afraid of is this idea of people's values maybe not aligning with what either the British or American nation state think to be the values of the greater population of the majority. But I don't think that comes down to. I mean, you can still maintain and keep and practice your culture in many ways, and I don't ever see a problem with that. I've never seen an issue with multiculturalism and exposure to multiculturalism. But as long as you are still, following the rules and the values and contributing as a productive and active member of the society of the whatever country and nation you have chosen to come from, I personally don't see the issue with it. And in America, I know that that rubs a lot of people the wrong way, because especially when it comes to the language. Everyone always says, particularly with Latin American immigrants, well, if you come to this country, not only are you expected to follow our rules and be part of our society, but you have to learn our language too. And in the Latin American community in America, that is a problem for a lot of people. English language is hard. It is, there are, like you said, these sort of parallel societies of other Latinos who work for other Latinos so they never end up learning the English language. I can tell you right now, my grandmother has been in the country over 50 years, still doesn't speak English because of that. And so I do see from at least that perspective, granted, I don't think, that is a reason to say, oh, you don't belong here, essentially, because especially from the American point of view, I mean, English only happens to be the main language because it was the English who happened to eventually conquer America, but plenty of other people with plenty of other languages have come through here. And originally it was nothing but thousands of different indigenous languages. So that I think, at least for the U.S., is not like a valid viewpoint to say someone is not considered American or shouldn't be allowed here. But I do see why that would cause some people, especially when you're not understanding what someone is saying, and like you say, it goes back to this idea of trust, right? You're thinking, if I don't understand them and they don't understand me, how can there be trust? How can there be understanding? And I think that a lot of the time is what frightens people. And also going back to, like I said, the idea of the values, they feel if some people were to say, well, that may be how it is over here, but that's not what I value. So I'm going to maintain my own values from my homeland, even if they are contradictory with yours. And I do believe there needs to be, compromise on that. You can't, you can't live exactly as you did before. You do have to adapt. You do have to assimilate to some degree, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's the friction that we're having. That's the debate
Mhm.
that we're having right now in the UK is how much should they change and assimilate for the UK? It's as they say, it takes two to tango. It's
Of course.
basically both a country that needs to kind of be proactive in kind of ensuring that
Yeah.
people assimilate,
In
and then
assisting the assimilation process, right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Let's let's move to the U.S. And our favorite president, Mr. Trump. Trump was elected on one of the main things he was elected on was removing people who entered the country illegally.
Mhm.
Is that a bad thing?
You know, it it's not a bad thing if it is focused solely on um I would say who entered the country illegally, but who also were proven to either be detrimental to the society, to the American society, or non-contributor, like bringing nothing to the American society. I would say then that narrows it down to not every illegal immigrant, obviously. I would say that would narrow it down to illegal immigrants who have come and either do not work or do not contribute or who participate in crime, participate in destructive behavior within the society. And when you do that, it becomes a much, much smaller pool, I believe, because the majority of immigrants, legal and illegal, that I have known from Latin America in particular, are very hardworking, very honest, and very, wholesome people. They are there for a better life. They don't want to make things, they don't want any reason to be scrutinized any more than they already are. They don't want to mess things up or cause chaos or anything of that nature, which isn't to say that it doesn't happen. Of course it does. There are the individuals who do, who seek to take the easy way out, who seek to not follow the rules and the values of the new society they're living in. But I think the problem is that those individuals, it kind of gets conflated into, well, that's sort of all of them. If they came here illegally, then they must, by that nature alone, be criminals and therefore engaging in criminal activity. And that is, not acceptable and detrimental to our society. And I do not believe that's the case. And I do not believe that the Trump administration is discriminating in that regard. In fact, I know they're not. They're looking at a very broad demographic of people. And it is also, unfortunately, coming down to a particular ethnic demographic of people. There are plenty of white European illegal immigrants in the U.S. too. I can tell you right now, I've known many of them, and nobody is going after them. Nobody's even mentioning them. There is absolutely, it's like they don't even exist. Or that they're not the real problem. Everyone says the real problem are, sorry to say, the brown and black immigrants, and the majority being Latin American immigrants. And so when you see it from that perspective, it really paints a different picture, right? If it were to say, okay, we're going after all illegal immigrants, regardless of what country they come from, and those who we have evidence of engaging in criminal behavior or have been, non-contributory to a society at all, those who aren't working, those who are collecting, say, unemployment, but without actually having any kind of employment of themselves, those who are taking advantage of the system. But there isn't that, they aren't discriminating to that degree. They are kind of just looking at things in a very generalized point of view and assuming that because these people came here illegally, or a lot of, and some didn't, by the way. That's the other thing. They have gone after and arrested many Latin Americans who they just assume are illegal because they are Latino, or because they hear them speaking Spanish, or because they see a particular name. I know many Puerto Rican people who I've known who have been targeted, and Puerto Rico is part of the United States. So you can see then you can see that there is, when you look at it from that point of view, and you see exactly how it's being done, it seems there are ulterior motives for this removal, that are not just let's get the bad people out of here. It's let's get the certain type of bad people, or not even bad people. Let's just get this certain type of people out of here.
Yeah. I mean, even the rhetoric has changed. It started off with, we'll go after the criminals, and then it just widened and widened and widened.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at the statistics right now, and apparently 28% of the migrants in ICE detention have criminal convictions. 25% are pending criminal charges, and the rest don't have charges.
Anything, right?
Yeah. So
And remember, some of those infractions or whatever they have, if you look even closer at the details, some of them are things like traffic offenses, or expired paperwork, or expired, like things that any U.S. citizen could have, and it would be nobody would care at all. But that's because they will look for anything and any excuse. But then, as you said, what about that other majority that has nothing or pending? Because pending doesn't mean proven. Pending could be it was a complete mistake. And I know I myself have had traffic violations or this. So if you do look at the statistics, like you were mentioning, it does paint a different picture of it, doesn't it? It doesn't look like these are thugs and gang members and people who are only there to do us harm. Not to mention, there's a huge amount of children and young people as well. And you think, what could they have possibly done, to warrant them being put in this type of situation, other than they happen to be the children of parents who are in this situation.
How is this impacting those communities in the U.S.?
It's been very difficult for us. I have the fortune of being here, but I speak to my mother and family and friends all the time, and I hear about what's going on. Um, and we are people of the Latin American demographic in particular are very much living in fear a lot these days. For example, my wedding was in Mexico this past May, actually. Wanted to do it there because I had spent much time there growing up, have some ancestry from there. Figured it would be a great place for a lot of the Scots to come as well and enjoy, and then a lot of my U.S. family could come as well. When I planned that, that was prior to Trump getting elected. And after that, a lot of my family on my mother's side, who are mainly immigrants, mainly from Cuba, Venezuela, and have varying statuses. Most of them are citizens, but some are not. Nobody is, I believe, illegal at this point, but some are not considered full-fledged citizens either. And a lot of them who were originally planning to come expressed to me that they were just too afraid at this point, that they would not make it back, that they would be targeted when trying to get back into the U.S. And regardless of what they've done or how many years they'd been in the U.S., there would be a problem. Even my own mother, who was a child when she came from Cuba to the U.S. and is a citizen and has worked in law enforcement, no less. She served as a district attorney for many years and a criminal prosecutor going after criminals. She was terrified as well and made sure to bring all her paperwork with her. Same with my aunt. But she said, you know, regardless, I've heard that even with all this, they may just look at where I was born because that will still show on my passport, that will still show on my paperwork, and it may cause a problem. Not only that, but with workplaces being raided, particularly workplaces like large farms and orchards, or any kind of workplace, hotels, anything with groundskeeping, places that have a large population of Latin American immigrants that are working there are at risk every day of just being randomly raided. People are afraid to go to work, afraid to go and make their living. Friends were telling me that a lot of festivals and cultural festivals that used to be done with great celebration and pride throughout the U.S. Have been canceled because they believe they will be targets for these raids. Where I grew up in Philadelphia, we have the Puebla Festival every year, which is a celebration of Mexican and greater Latin American culture, and it's always one of the highlights of the city and highlights of the year for everybody in the community to enjoy. And that has been canceled this year for that very reason. And we are not alone, that they are not alone in that regard. A lot of these basically things that we used to do just in daily life, go to work, celebrate, go to an event where there will be other people from our community, people are afraid to do. And it's shocking to me as a Latin American person to be, or somebody of Latin American descent, to see that. I never thought in modern America, where at least the rhetoric we were taught in school was to everybody is welcome and everybody is included, and we celebrate our cultures and our differences, and no one person will ever, or one group of people will ever be targeted for just being who they are and where they came from. But it seems that is exactly what's happening if it's forcing people to live in fear of even just living their basic everyday lives, right?
Yeah, I think I'm assuming for a lot of Americans, it's the stories they heard in Europe of what happened, a long, long time ago. But I think they never imagined to happen in the U.S. How does, someone like let's say your mother, who has contributed, been part of the society, part of the community, feel about, being American and what it's doing to its community?
I think she and other people like her from the Latin American community who have really felt, who came here because, and are here because, or here I say, I mean the United States,
Yeah.
who came because they wanted to come and came because they wanted to be part of the American dream and the American life and culture and contribute to it. People who became professionals, especially, not just them, of course. I mean, everybody who works, even the smaller level jobs or the more blue collar jobs are just as important. But those, I think, like my mother, who went to college, went beyond college to law school, and really made a name for themselves in what they felt was, okay, this is, what it means to be American when you are really contributing to the point people know what your name and know what you're doing, know your work and are great, accept you for it. I think they feel very let down, and very sort of betrayed in a way, or very, I guess, to the point that it will never, no matter what they do or what they achieve, it will never be enough. They could achieve the same things or greater than any white or, you know, uh, native-born American, somebody who, or at least somebody who was born in the country, has ancestry from the country, and they could be at their same level or achieve more than they do, and it still won't be enough um, to be accepted fully in the way those other Americans would be, simply because of their background, because of their culture that they still are proud of and still celebrate. The fact that even my mother, being the person who she was afraid that she would still be targeted regardless of all this that she had contributed, and that she probably had good reason to feel that way because others, including lawyers and professionals and politicians, have been targeted as well by these this administration and these raids, even for just speaking out about it, regardless of what their actual legal status is and everything. You can see it's been um, just sort of a very ham-fisted kind of anybody who stands in the way of or disagrees, regardless of what they have done, regardless of who they are. Um, it it doesn't matter, and so I think it definitely brings that sense of it never will. We will never be fully accepted. It will never be enough, at least in the current mindset that is pervasive among this administration.
Yeah. Do you feel that this is just a short-term hiccup that one Trump's going to go, in 3 years that everything will go back to normal, or is this the path that the U.S. is now taking for a long time?
You know, I hate to say it, and it has been very much like kind of a eye-opening experience because it's not just Trump alone. We obviously, yes, he's the face of it, and this is the one. He's the one that everybody looks to. But no one man can do something like this without people following and people helping and people supporting. And even if Trump were to die tomorrow, by whatever means, those people who put him in power, kept him in power, and reelected him, allowed him to continue to do this, and are allowing him to do these things every day, they're still around. And and those ideas and those sentiments that they agreed with, or that even if they didn't agree, they were okay with. They turned the other. They found acceptable. Um, that is something that won't just go away. And I used to believe, prior, at least to the second election anyway, that America, the majority of the American population, wasn't like that. I thought we were more open-minded. I thought we were more inclusive. I thought we were the kind who wouldn't stand for things like that. This very clear kind of tyrannism almost of just one person doing whatever they want and only benefiting themselves and people like them. But after the first time Trump was elected, and during that administration, I was like, okay, right, this can, it happened with Reagan once before too. Sometimes things just happen. People think, right, things aren't working the way they are. So even as outrageous as this one person may be, maybe it'll be better if we just go for it. But the fact that it was allowed to happen again, and that despite everything that had happened before, no lessons were learned, nobody seemed to care, or have any change of heart or change of feelings, at least the majority of the country didn't anyway, to the point where it made a difference, was even more, I think, disheartening and devastating. And I do think it will take more than just Trump going away to recover from that, at least from my perspective. I want to say it's almost more an attitude of apathy that I guess I didn't think we had or we didn't have to that level of American people. And I think that attitude of apathy, of just kowtowing to those in power, whatever crazy thing they may want to do, just because you don't want, you think, well, it's not me, so it's okay, until it is you, is a very dangerous slope to go down. We've seen it happen in other countries. You mentioned how what happened in Europe during World War II and everything. And I think that is how it started as well there too. Everyone sort of said, yeah, okay, this guy's a bit intense, extreme, and radical, but you know, it's not
I
us,
think a
it's
lot
not
of
the
people say,
majority.
"Oh, it can't get worse. We're already in a shit
Right.
situation. Let's go with
Exactly.
this." Yeah.
Exactly. And look what happened. And so I'm sorry to say, I like to hope and I like to keep faith that things can only get better, right? But I don't think it's as simple as once Trump's gone, that's it. At least in terms of um, the sentiments of the American public, and even just how I look at people, friends, family members, politicians, people who I used to respect and value, and thought were, you know, good people for the most part, or good and educated people for the most part, who shared the same values as I do. Um, I don't look at them the same anymore, and I'm not sure if I ever will. And I think that's something that has been shared by a lot of other Americans in my position. Who I mean, Trump has historically been the most divisive president in American history in terms of relationships that have broken down, and friendships and marriages, and um, parents and children, etc. Um, Even between political parties, and among um, colleagues and allies, every people who used to be on the same side, or thought they were on the same side anyway, are now realizing, right, okay, so we were on the same side, I guess, until there was a challenge such as this, and then when push comes to shove, it's sort of we you know, people's true nature, I guess, were revealed.
Yeah. The only thing I would say to that is I feel like people, even though they voted for some of the people that voted for Trump are realizing the ad is different to the product in
Hmm.
terms of, okay, they were pro closing the borders and deporting, criminals, but he's gone really way to the other extreme with that.
Yes,
He
yes,
was, they wanted to stop the wars, but we still have the both of the wars, and he started another war. in Iran.
yes,
There was a group around him that were supportive, that people trusted, like Elon, and they have even kind of left
yeah, yeah.
group. And now, with the Epstein, people wanted the Epstein files, and
Mm.
again, we're being lied to, it seems, around this stuff. So I think people are like, hang on, this is not. I'm
What
sure a
I
lot of
thought
people,
I voted
yeah,
for,
I'm
right?
sure a
Yeah.
lot of people love what he's doing. Some people will,
Hmm.
but I think a lot of people also will be like, hang on, no, this is not actually what I voted for, and they have some kind of buyer's remorse, and I think that might
Yes.
actually show up in the midterms, and definitely in 2 years' time.
Yes, and I remain hopeful for that as well, because I have seen that too. You're right. There are a decent population of people who do feel that way, and say, well, this isn't what I thought was going to happen, or this is, what I was misled. I was, I wanted, the way he presented it was different than the way it's being carried out. But to that, I say, I mean, were this his first term, I would say, okay, there's more of an excuse then for that. Yes, on the surface, maybe a lot of things sounded great, but you saw what happened before, and he made a lot of big promises then too. And were any of those promises delivered upon then? So what, I guess, you know, were you really fooled twice? Was that really, I mean, like, how many times will it take before you do realize that what he says and what he promises is not how and what he delivers? And I guess that was, for me, that's what the one thing that kind of makes me a bit more like, okay, you say that, but I mean, did you not learn the first time around? And it's much worse this time. You're right, because at least during his first term, he had more opposition in the Senate, in the House of Reps. There were people kind of pushing him back and preventing him from making these big, sort of sweeping sweeping movements, and kind of being an oligarch, just really, and a monarch to some degree. Whereas basically whatever he says goes. There were checks and balances, which is how the system is supposed to work in the American government. But I think this time, because he doesn't have the opposition he used to, and he's learned from that, from that first term, it is much worse. And maybe that's what it took. Like you said, maybe people are saying like, oh well, okay, yeah, it's really, yeah, the first time was meh, but this time is just so much worse. So yeah, okay, this is what what he does when he is given pretty much carte blanche to do so. Um, and I hope anyway, like you say, that that will make a difference. And I do know that at least several politicians and a lot of people are fighting now in the midterms to say, like, look, we have a chance to stop this now, and change this with the coming midterms. Obviously, yes, Trump won't be gone for another 3 years, but we can at least make changes in the House of Representatives, in the Senate, in Congress in general, to help at least put up some roadblocks to some of these things he's doing, or to have some more of this balance that we're meant to have in a government that we just do not have right now.
Yeah, and the crazy part is Elon Musk is now leading the charge of that.
I know, which is it's crazy, isn't it? I sort of, I was not surprised when that happened, though. I just said you can't have. I mean, they're both equally. I think they share a lot of like narcissism and like very like these personalities that just at one point or another, you see it in history and governments all the time. Someone wants more than, or someone feels that they're getting shafted and eventually is out for themselves, only themselves, and it will cause a rift. And I guess it's good, at least in that regard, because it shows like, well, look, even his biggest supporters are now saying like, well, no, that's not how I wanted to do things. And that will hopefully light the way. But even, I don't know, wouldn't necessarily want to follow a party led by Elon Musk. So it could just be now you're just getting more factions of the same type of people. But
Yeah.
I guess that it goes down to the my enemy's enemy is my friend kind of notion, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting how this will play. Natalie, it's been really interesting speaking to you. If people wanted to reach out to you, where can they find you?
Yes, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn under Natalie Huber Rodriguez. I'm the only one of that name there. And you can see some of the work that I have done there, some links to some publications, as well as activist work I have participated in, and message me directly as well if anybody has any questions or wants to see how they can help, particularly with efforts helping Latin American people in America right now with struggles they're facing, or Indigenous Americans too. But I also like to say, I having lived in Britain now for 4 years, I think Britain is a great country. And I think part of what makes it so great is all of the people that we do have here. And I am one of them now too, as being an expat here. And I think while I understand the fear that comes with this idea of foreign people from a foreign land coming into your home, or what you consider your home anyway, and I appreciate the fear behind it. I don't think that fear is warranted, at least to the degree that people are feeling it. And I think if you look at the history of Britain and the history of this country in general, if were it not for the vast amount of immigrants from these other lands we have, Britain would be unrecognizable today as what we know and love as Britain. So that country, that Britishness that everybody wants to hold and keep, that Britishness is only due to this long history of immigration and emigration. So when you say you want to fight for Britishness, I would say in that sense you want to fight for everything that includes, and that includes all the others that have been visited by and have visited to the country and made it their homes.
Indeed, and remember, the national dish of Britain is the tikka masala. So
I always find that absolutely bizarre in every way. I say that I've said that so many times. I say like everything you guys consider British is really it borrowed. A lot. Same is true for the U.S. too, though. So I think again that is what makes Britain great. And obviously, yes, it's not without its problems, but I think again that Britishness everybody wants to hold on to. They're misunderstanding what it actually means in that regard.
Yep, interesting.
I mean, if we all want to go back to pre-Celtic tribe, that's what everybody really wants, eating nothing but bread and sheep. But then
there, 100%. Natalie,
there we go.
Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here, and really appreciate you having me. Look forward to maybe speaking with you again at some point.
100%. Cheers.
Have a good one.